All right, guys, let's go ahead and get started. What we're going to be covering today is Unit 1, Basic Economic Concepts. The topic that we're going to be covering is 1.1, Scarcity. In this topic, we're going to be covering, of course, scarcity, the difference between micro and macroeconomics, and then we will be talking about opportunity costs and trade-offs, and then, of course, the 4 factors of production. All right, so moving along, again, 1.1, Scarcity. Now, first, let's do some definition stuff for this class. What is economics, right? Economics is the science of scarcity. What does scarcity mean? Scarcity means that we have unlimited wants but limited resources, right? So I think when you go to the mall and you want to buy stuff, or you go to the store, you're on Amazon or something like that, right? And you see a bunch of stuff and you're like, I want that, I want that, I want that. I want that pair of jeans, I want that shirt. I want that hat, I want those pair of shoes. Your wants are going to continuously grow, right, as you look through different things. The only thing is that you might be limited on the amount of money that you have in your bank account, right? So again, we have unlimited wants but limited resources. Now, because of those unlimited wants and limited resources, you have to make choices, right? Now think about that. Individually, if you were to again, you're at the mall, right? And you want to get a hat, you want to get a shirt, you want to get pants, you want to get new shoes, you want to get all this stuff, right? And but you're limited, and you have to make a choice based off the resources you have. Now, in this case, right, in this example, your resources are the amount of money that you have either in your bank account or in your pocket or whatever, right? So you're limited by that resource, okay? And so essentially what economics is then going to be the study of choices, right? Like the choices that an individual makes or a firm makes or the government makes, and looking at those choices or studying those choices are what economists do. Now, you as an individual, right? Or an example of you as an individual we've already kind of covered, right? Like you going to the mall and wanting to buy, let's say you only have $100, and so with that $100, you have a choice you have to make, right? Are you going to buy a hat and a shirt, or are you going to buy jeans and maybe a shirt, right? Like, what is it that you're going to choose based off of that? And so economists would look at that, right? Businesses, right? So if we look at an example of businesses, is how many people, especially right now with everything that's going on with COVID, how many people are businesses going to hire, right? Like Instacart is really doing well, right? Because everybody's getting their groceries delivered to them, right? So the company Instacart, they need to figure out how many people are they going to hire, knowing that this is eventually going to end, right? But they don't want to, have too many people working for them, right? So, or think if you work at, let's say, Whataburger, right? And so if you work at Whataburger and you have a lot of people standing around not doing much because it's very slow, there's not a lot of people going to Whataburger, the manager or the owner of Whataburger is going to need to figure out, well, how many people do I need to have on staff right now? And so that's a choice that they need to make, right? Because they don't have the resources to be able to pay people, to work, to do nothing, right? Like they need money to come in to pay those people. And then, of course, the government. So the government needs to pick and choose how they're going to spend their income, right? And their income is generated from taxes. So the government is going to decide, are we going to spend more on defense spending? Are we going to spend more on welfare? How much are we going to spend on welfare? How much are we going to spend on public education? And so that, of course, is the choice, and looking at that choice the government would make, right? So economics is the social, like textbook definition, economics is the social science concerned with the efficient use of scarce resources to achieve maximum satisfaction of economic wants, right? So that's kind of a mouthful, right? But if real easily, we could define that by the study of how individuals and societies deal with scarcity, right? Like how do we figure this out, that we have unlimited wants but limited resources? Now, moving on to microeconomics versus macroeconomics. So there's two big fields in economics, that are two branches of economics, macro and micro. And so microeconomics is going to be the study of the small firms, right, or markets or individuals, right? And so you're going to look more at supply, demand, industries, production cost, wage cost, and labor markets, right? While macroeconomics looks more at the whole scale, right? It looks at countries as opposed to smaller things, right? Like think of micro machines. When I was a kid, there was these things called micro machines, were little cars, right? So micro is smaller, right? And then macro being large, so larger economics. And macroeconomics deals with government and how with government growth, government spending, inflation, like prices increasing or decreasing, unemployment, and of course international trade. And so this class is going to cover all of those things, right? It's going to cover, we'll talk a little bit about supply and demand at the beginning and during the basic concepts, and then we'll talk about spending, government spending, price inflating or deflating, unemployment increasing or decreasing, and then we'll talk about trade at the very end. Okay, so how do economists use economics? So economists use the scientific method to make generalizations and abstracts to develop these theories. This is called theoretical economics. These theories are often applied to fixed problems to meet economic goals. This is again called policy economics. Now there's two statements that could be made when dealing with economics. There's positive statements and then there's normative statements. So a positive statement is going to be based on facts and it's going to avoid value judgment, right? So what is, and then the normative statement includes a value judgment, what ought to be, right? So you can think of a positive statement as something like factually based, like okay, the wage gap between the lowest earner and the highest earner is much larger today than it was back in, let's say, 1980, right? Or in the 1980s. And a normative statement could be something like, well, we ought to be using stimulus money right now to move the economy, or we might want to use, or we might ought to use tax cuts to stimulate the economy. So those would be examples of normative statements. Okay. Now, other examples of maybe like a positive statement would be the rising price of crude oil on the world market will lead to an increase in gas prices. This is a positive statement, right? Rise in the average temperature will likely increase the demand for sunscreen products, right? That, of course, is a positive statement. Pollution is the most serious economic problem. That's a normative statement. Now, for some people, that might be the most serious economic problem, is that pollution, right? But that's not a fact, right? That's maybe some people feel that's the way it ought to be, right? So now, economists make 5 key economic assumptions, and those 5 key economic assumptions we're going to look in this class is, of course, scarcity. And with scarcity, we have unlimited wants but limited resources. Now, because of that scarcity, we have to make a choice, and every choice is going to have a cost, right? And that is a trade-off, right? So like, for example, you're watching this video right now, right? You're trading off whatever you could be doing other than watching this video, right? Or let's say you missed class, right? You missed class because you had a doctor's appointment. So that doctor's appointment is your trade-off, right? So now, now you're trading off something else you could be doing to watch this video, okay? Work, right? Like let's say you work at Whataburger, okay? If you work at Whataburger, you're trading off that time, let's say between 4 and 8 o'clock, you're trading off that time and whatever you're studying and all the other things you could be doing to work at Whataburger. Okay? So the first key economic assumption is scarcity, the second one being a trade-off, and then the third one is everyone's goal to make choices that maximize their satisfaction. Everyone acts in their own self-interest, right? So it's very important to understand when we're talking about economics is that everybody's going to act in their own self-interest. Everybody's going to act in what's best for them. Everyone makes decisions by comparing the marginal cost and the marginal benefit of every choice, right? So we're going to look at the cost and the benefit of doing something, right? And that, of course, you're going to continue to do things until the cost outweighs the benefit, right? And then at that point, you're no longer going to do those things anymore, right? So, and then real life situations can be explained and simplified through models and graphs. So that's pretty important to understand because economists like to be really efficient, right? So with a graph, you can just show something real quick, and that can explain quite a bit of stuff just by simply looking at the graph instead of writing this long, very detailed paragraphs of what's happening in the graph. So it's a lot more efficient for an economist to show you a graph, or for us in this class to show you a graph and to understand what's going on in the graph. Okay. Now, thinking at the margin, okay? So this is an example of, let's say, the marginal cost meets marginal benefit, right? So if you were to, let's say, go to, let's say, Cece's Pizza, or like a all-you-can-eat buffet, right? And you go and you pay, let's say, $5 to eat as much pizza as you want, right? The first day, right? And let's say, you get, the benefit you get from that is, let's say, $10, right? Or equates to about $10, right? Then the next day, right, you're going to go to Cece's Pizza, or that buffet, that all-you-can-eat buffet. You pay your $5, and let's say you get $7 worth of benefit, right? Well, the third day you go, you pay $5, and now you're kind of tired, and you've eaten all the pizza that you want, and it's kind of boring, right? It's not as flavorful as it was the first time. So your benefit's only $2, right? Well, you would only eat pizza, or you should only eat pizza the first 2 days, right? Because your benefit outweighed your cost, right? The third day, you would not eat the pizza, right? Even though if you were to take all 3 days and you add them all together, it's going to be a higher benefit than the cost, right? The cost would have been $15, right? But then the first day you had 10, then you had 7, that's 17, and the third day you had $19, right? So again, you're going to keep going and incrementally, right? Marginally, which we'll see here in a second what that means, right? Additionally, right? So as you're going through things, okay? You're going to, as the first time you would do it, the second time you do it, and then the third time you decide not to do it, okay? All right, so marginal analysis, as I just mentioned, marginal is a key term in economics that we're going to use quite a bit, and that just means additional, right? So what we just did right now, that exercise, right, is a marginal analysis or thinking on the margin, right? So it's making a decision based on increments, right? So the increments would have been the pizza the first day, the pizza the second day, and then the pizza the third day, right? Now, let's look at this, right? Or let's go through this example. So, or let me give you another example of thinking on the margin or marginal analysis. So let's say that you and a friend decide to go to a football game on Friday night, right? You're going to go to your high school football game, or you're going to go to a college football game or whatever, right? You're going to go to a football game, and you're having a great time, right? You go in, you're getting your snacks, you're in the first quarter, everything's great. You see some of your friends, everything's good. Second quarter rolls around, hey, everything's even getting better, you're having fun. More of your friends show up. You go and you go get some nachos, some popcorn, everything's good. And then halftime rolls around, and your stalker ex-girlfriend, right? She's crazy, right? Or boyfriend, whatever, right? Shows up, and now things are not as fun as they were before, right? So at that point, you decide, hey, look, I need to leave and take off, right? The point is, and the point that I'm trying to make here is with this example is that you're going to continue to do something as long as the marginal benefit is greater than the cost, right? So your cost of being at that football game was great up until halftime, right? And up until your former significant other shows up and is kind of a crazy person, right? And ruins your time, right? So that's the point that you would leave, right? So that would be, again, an example of thinking at the margin. Okay, now moving on to trade-offs versus opportunity costs. Okay, so trade-offs and opportunity costs. So all decisions involve the trade-off, and I've already covered this, right? Like if you worked at Whataburger between 4 and 8 o'clock, right? You're trading off that time, that 4-hour block. You're trading off that time that you could be doing quite a bit of other things, right? You could be at the park, you could be working out, you could be studying for this class, you could be watching movies, you could be playing video games. You've taken all of those things and you've traded those off to work that 4-hour block at Whataburger, right? Because you're never going to get that time back, right? That 4-hour block after you've worked it is gone, right? So your trade-off is all the choices that you could have made, right? While your opportunity cost is the best choice of all of those things, right? Like, so for me, I think your best choice, right, is studying for this class. But I mean, you individually, because you're acting in your own self-interest, have to make that choice as to what is the best decision for you, right? So, I'm sorry, what is your best opportunity cost? So what you're missing out the most of that you would have rather been doing. So the best alternative, again, is your opportunity cost. Now, you make a decision all the time, right? Like every second of the day, you are making a decision. For example, watching this video right now, you've made the decision to sit here and watch this video, right? You could decide to sleep in, to not sleep in, right? You could decide to eat breakfast at home or go to McDonald's and have a McGriddle, right? You can go to Whataburger and have a #1 with cheese, right? Or you can make a ham sandwich at home, right? Who you're going to have lunch with, right? Like, are you going to sit with this particular group of friends, or are you going to sit with this particular group of friends? That's a choice that you make, right? And so are you going to instead go to the library and study for an exam or something that you have later on in the day, right? Are you going to go to bed on time, or are you going to stay up and watch Call of Duty or whatever video game you're going to be playing, right? So those are all choices that you make. So everybody makes a choice, and everybody has a trade-off, right? So and an opportunity cost. So why do you have to choose to do some things and not others? All the choices involve some type of some cost of some kind, right? Even if it's not monetary. So again, like some costs that you might see are going to be like time and what you're trading off, right? Like things that you could have been doing instead. Okay. Now let's think about this class or college when you guys go off to college, right? And let's think of 3 things, right? You can get good grades, you can have a good social life, or you can sleep enough, right? Now, you can only choose 2 of those things, right? So you can have good grades and a social life. So you'd be trading off getting enough sleep, right? So you're not going to get enough sleep if you want to go out and party all the time, but also get good grades, right? Because you're not going to sleep, right? Because you're going to be staying up partying, right? And then you're going to go out and you're going to need to figure out how to study and stuff like that. If you want to get good grades and you want to get enough sleep, then you're going to be giving up your social life, right? So, or if you want to have enough sleep and social life, then that's going to affect your grades, right? So you can see through that little triangle, right, that you're going to have to, that you can only make 2 choices, that you're trading off one or the other, right? Now, just some terminology that I'm going to make a little bit easier for you guys. Some of you guys are the textbooks that you guys are reading may make these a little bit more complicated, but they're a lot easier, right? So you're going to see the word utility. Utility is satisfaction, right? You'll see the word utils when you're measuring utility, right? Util is just your total is your utility, right? So if you eat, let's say, a Swiss roll, right? Like how many utils do you get from that Swiss roll? Let's say you get 100 points of satisfaction from that Swiss roll that you're eating, right? Marginal is just going to mean additional, right? So when you're thinking marginal benefit, like the additional benefit that you get each day from doing, or each time you do something, right? So if I eat 1 slice of pizza, I get, let's say, a lot of benefit from that, right? A lot of utility from that slice of pizza. I eat the 2nd slice of pizza, I get more utility from it. Or benefit from that, right? Or satisfaction, I should say. And then I eat a 3rd slice of pizza, I'm going to get more benefit or more satisfaction or more utility from that pizza, right? Or from that slice of pizza. And then the last one being allocate. So allocate just means to distribute, right? So we're talking a lot, and allocate's used a lot of times when we're talking about government. So how do governments allocate resources, right? Of course, there's command economies, and then there's mixed economies, and how those are how they allocate their particular resources. They distribute resources. Okay, So moving on to price versus cost, right? So price is simply what you pay, right? We all pay a price when we buy things, right? So if we go out to buy a pair of jeans, the price that we pay. Now, there's a difference between the word price and cost, right? Now, the cost is the amount the seller pays to produce that, right? So how much does it cost to make a pair of jeans? Well, you have to think of to ship the pair of jeans, to get the cotton or the whatever jeans are made of, right? To get that to produce the jeans. And then, of course, to sell the jean, right? And so all of that's included in the cost of the jean, right? And then we go and we pay the price for the jean, right? So if the jeans were $50, that's the price we pay. The cost is how much did it take to make that pair of jeans? Now, another big thing that we need to just kind of address is the word investment, right? In economics, when we talk about investment, we're talking about when businesses spend to improve their particular product, right? So if you're a fast food restaurant, right, and you buy new grills, right, that would be considered investment. Or you buy a bunch of new fryers to be able to fry your fries or whatever, your chicken sandwiches faster, that would be considered investment. Now, it gets pretty confusing because when you're talking to, when you're probably talking to your parents or something like that, and they say investment, they're probably talking about personal investment, right? Where you talk about stocks and putting money in this 401k or doing something like that. That's personal finance, right? That's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about accounting investment. We're talking about economics investment, which talks about business investment. So again, just a business trying to make itself better would be what we're talking about in economics. Now, from that, we get two types of goods, right? We get what is called consumer goods, and we get capital goods. Now, consumer goods are going to be created for direct consumption, right? So you can think of fast food, right? Like when you go to buy fast food, that's going to be consumer goods. If you go to buy, like, let's say a shake or something like that, that would be a consumer good. Now, a capital good is going to be a good that makes a consumer good. So you go to get a shake, right? The blender that they used would be considered a capital good. Okay. Now, moving on to the 4 factors of production. Okay, there is land, and that's pretty self-explanatory, right? Land is water, sun, animals, plants, right? So here in El Paso, right? If we're looking at I think it's 795 Wrestler. That's the land that the Whataburger sits on, right? And so that's the land and the building that it sits on, or that it's housed in. That's considered part of the land, right? Or the natural resources to use to produce goods and services, right? Labor is going to be all the people that work in the Whataburger, right? So the cashier, the cook in the back, the manager, the people that are cleaning up, that would be considered the labor. Now, there's 2 types of capital, right? There is physical capital, and then there's human capital, right? And so the physical capital is going to be like all the grills, the registers, the fryers, even the mop and the mop bucket would be considered the physical capital that building has, right? While the human capital is any training that the employees went through, right, to become Whataburger employees, right? Like the shift manager is going to have more human capital, right? Or is going to be more valuable, I guess, in human capital than, let's say, the cash register, right? And then the manager should have more training and stuff and experience and education in the world of Whataburger, right? Now, the last thing, or the 4th factor of production, is going to be the entrepreneur. And that entrepreneur, what they do is they bring all these factors together, and they act as the risk bearer for the business, right? And so they take initiative, they innovate, and they act again as the risk bearer. And why do they do this? Well, they don't do it for money, no, because they could make, let's say, $1 a day, and they're making money. What they're after is making profit, and it's pretty important to understand that, right? Because profit is going to be your revenue minus your cost. So what you're bringing in minus how much you're putting out, right? So, or how much you're having to pay. So keep that in mind, is that when we're talking about, or when you're talking about money, right, you're talking about profit. Okay, so just kind of maybe watch out for that when you're talking about business and stuff like that. Now, moving on to productivity. Okay, productivity is a measure of efficiency that shows the number of outputs per unit of input. Right. So your productivity as a student may be, how many papers are you able to write? Okay, you're one person, right? And if you're able to write 5 papers a day, right? Well, then your productivity is 5, right? So if you work at, let's say, a hot dog on a stick, right? And you're able to produce 15 hot dogs on a stick, you're able to cook 15 hot dogs on a stick in 1 hour, then your productivity is 15 hot dogs on a stick, right? So now, why do businesses and countries want to improve their productivity, right? Since all resources are scarce, improving productivity allows us to provide more stuff with fewer resources, right? So we want to, with the least amount of stuff, we want to be able to produce the most amount of stuff, right? So a business owner may want the most productive person, right? So they want someone that's going to be able to make the most hot dogs on a stick within an hour, right? Or the fastest and the quickest and the most in an hour, right? So they want the most productive person, okay? Now, that's going to wrap it up for topic 1.1. Again, that's scarcity. We covered scarcity. We covered micro versus macro. We covered opportunity costs, trade-offs, and the 4 factors of production. All right. Hope you guys have a great day. Thanks.